Right now, your brain is actually wired to process a spilled cup of coffee in a boardroom with the exact same chemical terror as, like, being hunted by an apex predator.
Yeah, it really is.
You know that feeling, right? That visceral, agonizing, full-body hot flash of a perfectly executed social faux pas. We have all been there.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone has.
You say the wrong thing, you make the wrong move, and suddenly the air in the room just gets sucked out. It's that universal, deeply agonizing experience of the cringe-inducing moment. Time just slows down to an absolute crawl.
Yeah, your peripheral vision literally narrows.
Exactly. And your brain starts flashing this giant neon sign that just says, error. But what is actually happening in that moment is a massive evolutionary mismatch, right?
Right.
Because your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, it literally cannot distinguish between social death and physical death.
It is a fascinating biological hijack, honestly. That immediate sinking realization that you have breached some unspoken social contract, it triggers the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Wow, okay, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, the HPA axis for short. Basically, your heart rate spikes, cortisol and adrenaline just flood your bloodstream. And blood is actually shunted away from your digestive organs.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it goes straight into your major muscle groups. Your body is physically preparing you to either, punch a saber-toothed tiger or sprint across the savannah.
But instead you're just like standing there in a conference room.
Exactly. You're in a coffee shop or a meeting, utterly trapped by your own blunder. The physical preparation for survival becomes the very thing that paralyzes you in a modern social context.
That is so wild. And today we're going to look at the exact mechanics of how we get trapped in that paralysis and, much more importantly, the tactical maneuvers required to get out.
Right, the escape plan.
Yeah. We have a really fascinating stack of sources today. And instead of just looking at these as funny stories, we are treating these compiled real-world anecdotes. Verbal slip-ups, physical catastrophes, digital disasters, and cultural misunderstandings as empirical case studies in social friction.
Because the goal for this deep dive is to extract a highly robust linguistic and behavioral toolkit.
I love that.
We are moving past the mere catharsis of shared misery, We really want to decode the very anatomy of an awkward situation.
We want to understand the precise, actionable strategies you can deploy to gracefully recover your social standing when you inevitably blunder.
Because the data within these case studies, it demonstrates that avoidance of faux pas is basically a statistical impossibility. If you interact with the world, it's going to happen.
Yeah, you're going to mess up.
So recovery, therefore, is where the true skill and the real social power resides.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with one of the most common yet deeply terrifying mental short circuits. We're talking about the name game.
So the name game.
Yeah, those momentary lapses in cognition that feel like a sudden power outage in the brain. Taking a scenario from our case studies here, imagine being at a high-stakes networking symposium.
Which are already cognitively demanding environments, by the way.
For sure. So you are introduced to a high-profile client, right? Someone whose business is critical. And instead of just stumbling over the pronunciation, you confidently call them by a completely different name.
You call a Susan a Bob.
Exactly. You call Susan Bob. It's brutal.
To understand the required reaction to this specific type of misidentification, we have to look at what happens in the brain when that misfire actually occurs.
Right.
Under the pressure of a networking event, the stress hormone cortisol is elevated. And high levels of cortisol actively disrupt the hippocampus, which is the brain's center for memory retrieval.
So it's not just me being lazy or careless.
Not at all. Your brain's filing cabinet is temporarily jammed by your own stress response. However, when the misfire happens, the instinct for many is self-preservation through denial.
Oh, yeah, the amateur move.
Right, attempting to just mumble past it or feign ignorance. People operate under this delusion that the other person's auditory processing is somehow as flawed as their memory retrieval.
Which is an incredibly dangerous assumption. I mean, if I call someone by the wrong name, they definitely heard it.
Oh, they heard it loud and clear.
Trying to glaze over it feels like a double insult,
Yeah.
You've forgotten their name, and now you are gaslighting them about reality.
That is precisely the psychological mechanism at play there. It creates a secondary layer of cognitive dissonance in the interaction.
So what's the fix?
Well, the only viable, mathematically sound path forward is radical transparency regarding the cognitive lapse. The optimal strategy relies on immediate correction paired with a specific flavor of self-deprecation.
Like admitting your brain just broke.
Exactly. You have to actively state that the failure is a hardware issue on your end. saying something like, I have absolutely no idea why my brain just supplied that name. My apologies, Susan.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it does two things. It immediately validates their identity, and it lowers your own status in the interaction slightly, which in turn elevates them.
You are essentially taking the penalty on the field to reset the play.
That's a great way to put it.
But what about the variation of this where you don't even have the wrong name? You just have zero information. Like, another case study highlights a scenario where someone is in the middle introducing a colleague to a department head, and the brain just provides a static-filled scream.
Total blank.
The name is completely gone. To survive it, the person deploys what the source describes as the proxy introduction.
Ah, yes, the proxy introduction.
They physically bring the two individuals together, say, "It is so wonderful to finally have you both in the same room," and then they just stop talking.
It is a fascinating manipulation of social vacuums. You are banking entirely on the ingrained sociological script of the other two individuals to fill that silence with their own introductions.
Because nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. And so does polite society.
I have to push back on the reliability of that strategy, though. It feels like a high-stakes game of social chicken.
It definitely is a gamble.
It's like throwing a conversational hot potato to these two people stepping back and just staring blankly, hoping one of them catches it. But what if they don't?
Right. What if they just wait?
Yeah. What if they are both adhering to a hierarchical script where they expect the mutual connection you to facilitate the bridge? If they just stare at you expectantly, that silence isn't a vacuum being filled, it's a bomb going off.
You are identifying the core vulnerability of the tactic right there. It requires a high-context environment where both parties are equally extroverted, or at least socially proactive.
Yeah, if they're shy, you're doomed.
Or if there's a power differential, right? Say the department head expects deference and a formal introduction from you. That pause will stretch into an excruciating eternity.
Oh, just thinking about it makes me sweat.
It is a huge risk. When it works, it flawlessly bypasses your hippocampal failure. When it fails, it highlights it with a spotlight.
I want you, the listener, to think about a time your mind was utterly devoid of a crucial piece of information right when you needed it most. We walk around with supercomputers in our skulls, but occasionally the operating system just crashes.
It's a universal vulnerability.
For sure.
And, we've been analyzing the brain failing to retrieve information. But what happens when the failure isn't cognitive, but motor?
Oh, no.
Yeah. When your brain knows exactly what the social rules are, but your body betrays you by actively destroying the physical environment. A cognitive lapse can sometimes be masked with clever stalling, like we just talked about.
Right.
But a physical blunder leaves undeniable, visible, and often really messy evidence.
Which perfectly sets up our next major point of friction, the physical disaster. One of the case studies details a workplace nightmare that is almost cinematic in its horror.
It's so bad.
Someone spills a scorching cup of coffee directly onto their boss. And, adhering strictly to the laws of the universe, the boss is wearing a pristine, light-colored shirt.
Of course they are. Murphy's Law in action.
The internal threat level goes to maximum immediately.
This represents a massive escalation because it is an accidental intrusion into personal space that results in tangible property damage and physical discomfort.
Yeah, that coffee is hot.
The text provides a rigorous breakdown of the necessary timeline of recovery for a blunder of this magnitude, and it operates on 3 very distinct psychological stages.
Let's break those down. Because my instinct, and I think the instinct of a lot of people, would be to start making light of it immediately to break the tension.
Oh, to just laugh it off.
Yeah, just laugh and say, well, guess you needed a wake-up call. But the data says that is the worst possible move.
What's fascinating here is that it is a completely fatal move. Stage 1 is the immediate aftermath, and the required posture is absolute, unambiguous contrition.
No jokes.
No jokes. You must take immediate material responsibility. You offer the napkins. You offer to pay for the dry cleaning. You apologize without any caveats.
And then what?
Then comes stage 2, which is the purgatory phase.
Purgatory phase. That sounds awful.
It is. The case study notes the individual spent a week basically walking on eggshells around the boss. This is because you cannot rush a victim's emotional processing.
Right, they're still mad.
The boss needs time to navigate the annoyance of the ruined shirt and the physical burn. If you act like everything is normal too quickly, you signal a complete lack of empathy for the asymmetry of the inconvenience.
Because you spilled the coffee, but they had to wear the stain.
Exactly. You have to sit in the discomfort.
Yeah.
But stage 3 is where the real nuance is. The delayed release.
Okay, tell me about the delayed release.
The case study mentions that a few weeks later, the person made a self-effacing joke about being a biological hazard around hot liquids, and the boss chuckled. That chuckle was the official pardon.
Wow, weeks later.
What's fascinating here is the psychology of humor, specifically the benign violation theory.
What's that?
For something to be funny, it has to be a violation of our expectations or norms, but it also has to be fundamentally benign, meaning it isn't an active threat.
Okay, I track that.
In stage 1, a joke fails because the violation is still malevolent. The coffee is hot, the shirt is ruined. It is an active threat to the boss.
It's like putting out a house fire. In the moment, you need a fire extinguisher. That is the immediate, sincere contrition and the offer to pay for dry cleaning.
Right.
You don't start roasting marshmallows while the living room is still burning. The joke comes weeks later when you're sweeping up the ashes.
An excellent functional analogy. Time is the variable that transforms the malevolent violation into a benign one.
That makes total sense.
By introducing the joke weeks later, sweeping up the ashes, as you said, you are offering a low-stakes opportunity for the victim to signal that the event has transitioned from a threat to a memory.
So the chuckle is clearance.
Yes. The chuckle isn't just laughter, it is a neurological signal of psychological safety.
Okay, so accidental physical intrusion, like spilling coffee, is clumsy.
Yeah.
But it raises a deeper question about spatial dynamics.
How so?
Well, how do we navigate situations where physical space is intentionally and uncomfortably restricted, where we are forced into proximity without the chaotic distraction of a spilled beverage?
This brings us to the science of proxemics.
Proximity.
Yeah, it's the study of how humans use space and how it affects our behavior. And the classic quintessential forced proximity scenario is the elevator.
The elevator etiquette analysis in the sources is so fascinating. You step into a tiny metal box with a colleague or a total stranger, and there is a sudden, rigid choreography.
Everyone faces the door.
Yes. Eye contact is strictly forbidden. It's like we all silently agree to pretend we are in a sensory deprivation tank.
From a sociological standpoint, an elevator is a micro-society with intense temporary rules. Because you are breaching the standard boundaries of personal space, which is typically about 1.5 to 4 feet in Western cultures, you have to compensate by aggressively increasing psychological distance.
Which means acting like a statue.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You freeze your body and stare at the floor numbers to signal, I am physically close to you, but I am absolutely no threat to you.
And if the silence becomes too oppressive and you are forced to engage in small talk, it is agonizing.
Oh, the worst.
You mentioned the weather, you mentioned how slow the elevator is, and then the conversational well runs completely dry.
But what the analysis in our sources does brilliantly is connect the physical entrapment of the elevator to a modern, much more severe psychological entrapment.
The digital elevator.
Specifically, the reply-all email catastrophe.
Oh my God, the ultimate digital point of no return. You fire off an incredibly candid, highly critical email about a specific person, hit send, and immediately realize you included that exact person on the thread.
It is the same fundamental dynamic of forced proximity. In the physical elevator, you are trapped with a person. In the reply-all disaster, you are digitally trapped with your own transgression.
Because it's in writing.
The words exist in a permanent searchable space. You cannot escape the proximity to your own mistake.
So what is the actual protocol here? Because human panic immediately looks for the exit hatch, right? The instinct is to fabricate a cover story.
Of course.
To say, oh my gosh, I am so sorry that email was actually meant for a different Susan in accounting who I have a running joke with. Why does lying spectacularly fail in this scenario?
Because of the cognitive load required to maintain the fiction, and frankly, the underlying insult to the recipient's intelligence.
People aren't stupid.
Exactly. When we lie under pressure, our logic is usually incredibly flawed. The contents of a highly specific complaint rarely map perfectly onto a fictional third party.
Right, the details won't add up.
When you attempt to lie your way out of a reply-all disaster, you are firing a flare gun in a crowded room to distract from the fact that you just dropped the glass.
Everyone saw the glass break.
Yes, and now they're watching you wildly wave a flare. You compound the initial error of negligence with an active error of deceit.
The sunk cost fallacy of lying. You think you've already ruined things, so you might as well double down to save face, but you actually just destroy your baseline integrity.
You can't unring that bell.
The protocol has to be radical accountability then.
Radical accountability. You state clearly what happened, you apologize for the specific impact of the words, and you do not offer a defensive preamble. You own the digital space you polluted.
It's terrifying, but it's really the only way to stop the bleeding. Now, the reply all mistake fundamentally happens because of a context error, right?
Exactly.
You assume you are in a private digital room, but you are actually in a public one. You assume you know the rules of the environment.
And operating on unexamined assumptions is perhaps the most dangerous behavioral pattern we have.
Because we don't even know we're doing it.
Right. When we assume the rules of our own context apply universally, we set ourselves up for monumental failures. This is most vividly demonstrated when we cross borders and enter new cultural contexts.
Yes, we are moving into the transatlantic minefield. One of the case studies involved someone relocating from the US to the UK, speaking the same language, but falling into a massive linguistic trap.
This one is classic.
They innocently referred to their waist bag as a fanny pack.
Which, in British English, shifts the meaning from a harmless accessory to a highly vulgar anatomical reference.
Huge difference.
It demonstrates a critical concept in linguistics, the illusion of transparency. Because we share a language, we assume a perfect one-to-one mapping of meaning.
Here's where it gets really interesting. He describes getting deeply scandalized, bewildered glares from his British colleagues until someone finally pulled him aside to explain.
It's a perfect example of how your intent can be completely benign, but the cultural impact is nuclear.
And the data on cross-cultural friction really highlights this.
When we analyze the data, we see two distinct categories: linguistic pitfalls, like the fanny pack incident, and behavioral etiquette failures.
Like the Japanese chopstick story.
Yes. Another case study places a Westerner in Japan, where they unwittingly commit a severe faux pas by using their chopsticks to point at people across the table.
And the reaction they get isn't verbal correction, it is just these strained, overly polite smiles from the hosts.
That reaction is the absolute hallmark of navigating a high-context culture.
What's the difference between high and low context?
In low-context cultures, like the US or Germany, communication is explicit. If you do something wrong, someone will likely just tell you.
They'll call you out.
Exactly. But in high-context cultures, like Japan, communication is heavily reliant on nonverbal cues, shared history, and strict social hierarchy.
So the polite smile is actually a reprimand.
Yes, the polite smile is a mechanism to preserve harmony or wa while internally acknowledging the friction. The Westerner was completely blind to the severity of their action because they were waiting for a low-context verbal reprimand that was never going to come.
Wow, it really demands a completely different operational framework. It demands true cultural literacy. You have to constantly analyze the physical choreography of the room. Do you shake hands? Do you bow? Do you offer a double cheek kiss?
The underlying directive here isn't just to memorize a global rule book, though, because that's impossible.
Right, there are too many rules.
The core strategy from the text is to err on the side of caution and observe the room before acting. You have to intentionally suppress your brain's default heuristics.
Heuristics being?
They are the mental shortcuts our brains use to make quick decisions and save energy. In a familiar environment, they keep us safe. In an unfamiliar cultural environment, they make us incredibly dangerous. You must actively shift from automatic processing to deliberate observation. Just read the room.
But the terrifying truth is that those cognitive shortcuts, those heuristics, don't just betray us overseas.
Not at all.
They betray us in our own backyards. Reading the room isn't just for international travel. When those shortcuts misfire domestically, it leads to the absolute worst kind of social blunder: implicit bias and the erroneous assumption.
The brain is essentially an association machine. It constantly categorizes people and environments to process information faster.
To save time.
Right. But when those categorizations are based on flawed, socially conditioned biases, the resulting behavior is often catastrophic.
The case studies outline some incredibly painful examples of this. Imagine being at a high-end corporate dinner. You see a woman standing near a table. She isn't wearing a name badge, and your brain instantly categorizes her as waitstaff.
A classic implicit bias failure.
You actively try to order the soup du jour from her, only to discover she is the CEO of the company hosting the dinner.
It is a profound failure of System 2 thinking, which is the deliberate analytical part of the brain.
They just ran on autopilot.
Yes, the individual allowed System 1, the fast, automatic, bias-driven part of the brain, to completely dictate their behavior. They assess professional rank based purely on appearances and situational context, bypassing any critical inquiry.
And the social penalty for that is severe because you aren't just making a mistake, you are broadcasting your internalized biases to an executive in real time.
It's incredibly damaging.
But the case studies also pair this professional nightmare with deeply personal ones. Enthusiastically asking a woman when she's due only to find out she isn't pregnant.
Oh, that one hurts to even think about.
Or complimenting someone on massive weight loss only to be told it's the result of a severe chronic illness. It's horrifying.
In all of these scenarios, the person committing the blunder is operating under what they perceive as benevolent intent.
Right. They think they're being nice.
They want to order food, celebrate a life event, or offer praise. But intent is completely irrelevant when the foundational assumption causes harm. The impact obliterates the intent.
So how do you scientifically deconstruct the apology for something like that? Because my absolute first instinct, if I ask a non-pregnant woman when she's due, is to fall to my knees, beg for forgiveness, and explain for 10 minutes how terrible I feel.
Which is a natural reflex, but the sociological data suggests that is a remarkably selfish response.
Why is it selfish? I'm the one groveling.
Because it is fundamentally selfish to over-apologize. We have to analyze the economics of emotional labor here.
Okay, explain that.
When you commit a severe faux pas, you create a social debt. If you react with a prolonged, agonizing display of guilt and self-flagellation, you're essentially demanding that the victim pay off that debt for you.
Oh, well.
You force the person you just insulted into the role of caregiver. They have to suppress their own discomfort to manage your emotional distress, saying things like, "Oh, it's okay, don't beat yourself up. People make that mistake a lot."
I am making my guilt their problem. I am outsourcing my emotional regulation to the victim. That is wild to think about, but it makes perfect sense.
Therefore, the tactically sound recovery requires you to carry the weight of the awkwardness entirely on your own shoulders. The protocol is a precise, succinct apology, followed immediately by a decisive conversational pivot.
But how do you actually execute that pivot after asking about a pregnancy that doesn't exist without getting intellectual whiplash? You can't just say, "I am so sorry, I assumed you were pregnant. Anyway, how about the stock market?"
No, that feels completely robotic.
Right.
It requires an acknowledgement of the friction before the pivot. The formula involves validating the error, taking ownership, and offering a safe off-ramp.
What does that sound like?
I am incredibly sorry. That was completely out of line for me to assume. Please forgive me. We were just discussing the timeline for the new rollout, and I would genuinely value your perspective on phase 2. You firmly close the door on the blunder, you absorb the internal cringe without projecting it onto them, and you immediately open a door to neutral, professional ground where they can regain their footing.
It is emotional damage control at its absolute finest. I really challenge you, the listener, to examine your own implicit biases. Have you ever made a snap judgment in a professional setting that spectacularly backfired despite good intentions?
It requires relentless vigilance. Now, a crucial pattern to observe in everything we've analyzed so far, from the cortisol-driven memory blocks to the cultural misreads and biased assumptions, is that the friction was accidental.
Right. Nobody wakes up and puts insult the CEO on their to-do list.
Precisely. But there's an entirely different category of social dynamics where you must intentionally introduce friction into a relationship.
Intentionally?
Yes, where the awkwardness is not a byproduct of an error, but a functional requirement of your job.
Oh, we are talking about the delicate art of giving constructive feedback, dealing with unsolicited criticism, or giving feedback to notoriously hypersensitive colleagues. It is a conversational minefield.
It absolutely is. And for decades, management training relied on a concept known as the compliment sandwich.
Flanking a critique with positive affirmations to soften the blow.
Exactly.
Which always feels incredibly transparent and patronizing to me. The bread is a fake compliment, the meat is the insult, and the bottom bread is another fake compliment. Everyone knows what you are doing.
Because it is a structural gimmick, not a psychological tool.
So what's the alternative?
To truly deliver feedback that is absorbed rather than repelled, we have to understand psychological reactance theory.
Reactance theory.
Human beings have a deeply ingrained evolutionary drive to protect their behavioral freedoms and their self-concept. When an individual feels that their autonomy or their competence is being threatened, they experience reactance.
Which is what?
A motivational state directed toward reestablishing that freedom.
They dig their heels in.
Exactly. And nothing triggers psychological reactance faster than the word "you" paired with a negative action.
You messed up the data in this report.
Yes. When a person hears that phrase, their amygdala perceives a direct threat to their identity. Their cognitive load shifts entirely to defensive posturing.
They literally stop processing the factual information about the data because all of their mental energy is devoted to counter-arguing the attack on their competence.
They go completely deaf to the feedback.
So how do you bypass the amygdala's threat detection system?
Through a subtle but incredibly powerful linguistic shift from you statements to I statements. Instead of "you messed up the data," the phrasing becomes, "I noticed a discrepancy in the data on page 4."
It completely changes the geometry of the conversation.
It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is an exercise in supreme tact, empathy, and self-awareness. You remove the direct accusation.
You take the target off their chest.
You are no longer attacking their identity. You are simply reporting your own subjective observation about an external third-party object to report.
Right.
By focusing on your perception, "I noticed," rather than their action, "you messed up," you do not trigger their reactance. You invite them to look at the problem alongside you, rather than defending themselves against you.
So what does this all mean? Synthesizing all of this, navigating social grace isn't about achieving some impossible standard of perfection where you never make a mistake or never have to deliver bad news.
No, not at all.
It is about an intense, active empathy. It's about recognizing the psychological architecture of the person across from you, knowing they have an ego, a threat detection system, and a finite capacity for emotional labor, and choosing to actively communicate within those parameters respectfully.
That is the fundamental through line. Whether you are managing the fallout from a spilled cup of coffee or initiating a high-stakes performance review, the mechanics of empathy remain exactly the same.
We have dissected a massive amount of human behavior today.
We really have.
From the sheer panic of a hippocampal misfire during an introduction, to the slow burn sociological recovery required after a physical catastrophe, the transatlantic perils of linguistic illusions, the heavy cognitive load of implicit bias, and the tactical deployment of I statements to bypass the ego.
If we distill this deep dive down to its absolute essence, it is the profound realization that human beings are fundamentally fallible.
We mess up.
We operate on flawed heuristics, our biology betrays us under stress, and we constantly misinterpret the data around us.
It's the messy reality of the human condition.
But the true measure of our social intelligence isn't found in a pristine record of flawless interactions. As the case studies reveal, the true measure of an individual is entirely located in the mechanics of their recovery.
So, to you listening, the next time the HPA axis kicks in and you feel that hot flash of a massive blunder, remember your ultimate tools for navigating social friction.
Drop your ego.
Yes, drop your ego. Acknowledge your humanity. Radical transparency over denial. Acknowledge the timeline of forgiveness. Sincere contrition is your fire extinguisher. Delayed humor is how you rebuild. Radical accountability is your only life raft in a digital disaster.
And read the room.
Actively suppress your assumptions and read the room. And above all, when the friction occurs, do not make your guilt someone else's problem.
I would leave you with one final, lingering concept that builds on the text we've unpacked. There's a psychological concept known as the pratfall effect, which demonstrates that highly competent people actually become more likable and more relatable after they make a small, clumsy mistake.
Wait, really?
Yes. Their vulnerability humanizes them to everyone else. If we consider that the measure of a person is how gracefully they navigate recovery, it stands to reason that a life lived without any awkward moments isn't a sign of social perfection.
What is it then?
It is a sign that you aren't taking enough risks. It's a sign of extreme, isolating caution. Our blunders and the shared, authentic vulnerability that must follow them to repair the breach actually the secret evolutionary glue that builds deeper human connections.
Wow.
When that boss finally chuckled at the coffee joke weeks later, the psychological safety between those two individuals was likely stronger than if the coffee had never been spilled at all because they had successfully survived a conflict together.
The cringe is the crucible. That completely reframes the entire experience. A flawlessly executed recovery might actually build a stronger bridge than never having a gap in the first place. We'll take this new linguistic toolkit out into the world. Suppress those default heuristics, communicate with active empathy, and whatever you do, do not be afraid to make a few spectacular, deeply human mistakes along the way, because when the ground feels like it needs to open up and swallow you whole, you now know exactly the science of how to step right over it. Until next time.
Imagine you're at a dinner party in London.
Oh, setting the scene.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
The ambiance is perfect, the conversation is flowing, everyone is laughing, and then completely unprompted, you use this perfectly innocent American slang phrase.
Uh-oh. I know where this is going.
Yeah, and it just instantly, aggressively silences the entire room. The air just gets sucked out of the space.
Just complete dead air.
Exactly. You haven't broken a law, you haven't physically harmed anyone, but you've just stepped on a psychological landmine.
Which is almost worse, in a way.
It is.
Yeah.
Making a mistake in public, stepping out of line without even realizing you were near a line. I mean, it's universally terrifying precisely because it doesn't leave a physical mark.
Right. There's no past you can wear to show people you're recovering from a shattered ego.
No. You're just left standing there in the deafening quiet, dealing with this completely invisible injury.
And because we can't always point to a physical, tangible wound when we mess up socially, we are left trying to articulate something deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's what makes social dynamics so incredibly murky. We operate on these unspoken agreements, right? And when you breach one, the punishment is entirely psychological.
You literally feel it in your nervous system. Your heart rate spikes, but outwardly, nothing has changed.
Exactly.
Which is exactly why we are plunging into this deep dive today for you guys listening. We are exploring the linguistic anatomy of a social disaster.
It's such a fascinating topic.
It really is. Our foundation for this exploration is this brilliant discussion we've been analyzing called Linguistic Recovery, Navigating Social Faux Pas and Advanced Lexicon.
A bit of a mouthful, but a great source.
Right. But to be clear to everyone listening, we are not just doing a sterile vocabulary lesson today. I mean, we are looking at how having the precise advanced vocabulary to describe and process these social mistakes is actually like a cognitive superpower.
Oh, absolutely. The psychology behind that framing is profound. By giving our embarrassment a name, by attaching high-level English lexicon and very specific idioms to our blunders, we actually gain emotional control over them.
So it's about control.
Yes, exactly. You take this nebulous, awful, suffocating feeling of humiliation and you force it into a linguistic framework. You categorize it.
And once it's categorized, it's less scary.
Right. The moment the human brain categorizes a threat, it can begin to dismantle it. Language is, it's the tool we use to pull ourselves out of the emotional wreckage.
I love that. So let's start right at the epicenter of that wreckage, right? The inciting incident.
The spark.
Yeah, the spark. In the source discussion, the speakers identify the core event of any social disaster with a very specific, universally recognized term, a faux pas.
A classic. It's a French loanword that has seamlessly integrated into English. And, well, if you look at its literal translation, it means a false step.
A false step.
Yeah. I think we need to linger on the physics of that metaphor for a moment because it perfectly captures the somatic experience of social embarrassment.
Right, like walking down a staircase in the dark and thinking there's one more step than there actually is.
Yes, the worst feeling.
Your foot just drops through empty space, and for a split second, your stomach lurches into your throat because your brain registers that you are completely out of balance.
That stomach lurching feeling is your vestibular system realizing the ground isn't where it was supposed to be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And in English, we've adapted faux pas to describe that exact sensation, but entirely in the social realm. It's a blender in etiquette.
So it's when you violate an unwritten rule.
Exactly. The etiquette of the room is the solid ground you are walking on, and committing a faux pas is stepping right off the edge of it.
That makes so much sense. The dinner party example from the source material is like the quintessential illustration of this.
Oh, the salary question.
Yes. You're having a lovely time. You're trying to show genuine interest in the person sitting next to you, and you casually ask them how much money they earn.
Which, in many Western cultures, is the ultimate hidden tripwire.
But why is that? I mean, why do we have these invisible rules that carry such massive psychological penalties?
Yes, complicated, yeah.
Like, if I ask someone their favorite color, it's polite. If I ask them their salary, it's a faux pas that can literally ruin an evening.
Right.
You often don't even know the rule existed or that the topic was, like, culturally radioactive until you've already broken it.
Well, it comes down to how societies organize status and hierarchy.
Okay.
In Western, particularly capitalist societies, wealth is deeply intertwined with personal value, class anxiety, and perceived social dominance.
So it's not just a numbers question.
Not at all. Asking about salary isn't just asking for a data point. It's demanding that someone reveal their exact hierarchical rank at the table.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
It forces a sudden, stark comparison of worth that shatters the egalitarian illusion of a friendly dinner party. The faux pas isn't just the question, it's the sudden, aggressive introduction of class anxiety into a relaxed space.
It's like pulling back the curtain on the machinery of society when everyone just wanted to watch the play.
That's a great way to put it.
So if we are, generally well-intentioned people trying to navigate these complex social plays, why do we keep making these false steps?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Our source points to a very specific linguistic trap that triggers these disasters, and they call it a colloquial discrepancy.
Yes, this is where the linguistic analysis intersects beautifully with cognitive psychology.
I found this part so interesting.
It is. Often, a massive faux pas isn't born out of malice or even ignorance of broad cultural values. It's a hyper-specific failure of context.
Okay, so break that down for us.
Sure. If we look at the mechanics of a colloquial discrepancy, we are looking at two concepts colliding. Colloquial language is the informal, familiar vocabulary you use in ordinary conversation.
It's the linguistic shorthand you develop with your in-group, right?
Precisely. And a discrepancy is an illogical lack of compatibility between two things that you inherently expect to match.
So when you put them together, you get an absolute social minefield.
Exactly. A colloquial discrepancy occurs when the informal shorthand you use in one context is transported to a different context, where it carries a wildly different, often offensive meaning.
The incompatibility isn't just surprising, it's jarring.
Very jarring.
The source gives a highly embarrassing, extremely visceral example of this.
Oh, yes, the Fanny story.
Or a Fanny story. One of the speakers tells a story about using the word fanny. Now, in the United States, this is a very mild, completely innocuous colloquialism for your backside.
Right, your glutes.
Yeah, a kindergarten teacher might tell a toddler to sit down on your fanny. It's practically infantile. But in the United Kingdom...
Oh, in the United Kingdom, it is colloquial slang for female anatomy.
Yeah.
It is significantly vulgar, highly inappropriate for mixed company, and absolutely not something you would ever say casually to a child or at a polite dinner gathering.
Right. It carries an intense taboo weight.
It really does.
The discrepancy there isn't just a slight misunderstanding. It's a 180-degree shift from innocent to obscene. But I want to dig into the mechanics of why this specific trap is so devastating. Because, if I go to Tokyo and try to speak Japanese, I might butcher the pronunciation, but people will generally be forgiving.
Because you're clearly a foreigner trying your best.
Right. But when an American goes to London and drops a colloquial discrepancy, the reaction is often pure shock and horror.
Well, it's because of what neurologists might call the illusion of safety, or the lack of cognitive friction.
The illusion of safety.
Yeah. When you are speaking a completely foreign language, your brain is in a state of high cognitive load. You are walking carefully, checking your mental dictionary, and hyper-aware that you don't fully understand the rules.
You're emotionally braced for impact.
Yeah.
You know you're walking on ice.
Exactly. Your threat detection system, your amygdala, is somewhat primed for an error. But with a colloquial discrepancy, you are operating under the deeply flawed assumption that you share the same linguistic ecosystem.
Oh, I see.
An American in London thinks, we both speak English, the operating system is the same, I am entirely safe. Your guard is down. The cognitive friction is zero.
Why?
So when the faux pas happens, your brain's threat detection system is caught completely offline. You stride confidently onto that landmine with a smile on your face.
That false sense of security makes the physiological explosion so much worse.
Oh, incredibly worse.
You aren't prepared for the room to go quiet. You haven't braced for impact. So the shock is visceral.
The cortisol floods your system instantly because you have gone from completely safe to socially exiled in a fraction of a second.
And that sudden, massive spike in stress hormones fundamentally alters how your brain processes the next several hours or even days of your life.
Which initiates the next phase of the social disaster.
The mental aftermath.
Yeah.
Because here is where the human experience gets truly fascinating and, well, a little pathetic.
Let's be honest, very pathetic sometimes.
Right. Once the colloquial discrepancy happens and the faux pas is committed, the external world usually recovers quite quickly.
Right. The British dinner guests might gasp, realize you're just an ignorant American, nervously laugh, and politely change the subject.
The external environment stabilizes.
Yeah.
But our internal environment, it completely shattered.
It does.
And the source material uses such a textured, evocative word for what our brain starts doing the moment we get home. Ruminate.
To ruminate, it's a heavyweight word.
It really is.
The source discussion makes a crucial distinction here. Ruminating is not synonymous with just thinking or reflecting.
How so?
Reflection implies a forward-moving process where you analyze an event and extract a lesson. Rumination is a cyclical, obsessive trap. It implies chewing over an idea repeatedly, aggressively, without any forward momentum.
The biological etymology of that word is incredible. I mean, it literally comes from what cows and other ungulates do.
It's exactly, the cud.
Yeah, a cow eats raw grass, swallows it into its first stomach, regurgitates it back into its mouth as cud, and then chews it again. And then swallows it and regurgitates it over and over.
It is a literal, endless loop of chewing to break down something that is fundamentally indigestible.
It is a brilliantly grotesque metaphor for human anxiety.
It really is. When we experience that massive cortisol spike from a social blunder, we swallow the embarrassment whole, but our psyche cannot digest it.
So you lay in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, and you regurgitate the memory. You replay the silence in the room.
You chew on what you should have said.
Yes. You mentally rewrite the script where you look suave and sophisticated, and then you swallow it, roll over, and 20 minutes later, your brain brings it right back up again.
The source illustrates this with a deeply relatable professional scenario.
Oh, the meeting one.
Right. Someone entirely botches a presentation in a high-stakes meeting. They lose their train of thought, they give the wrong data, and they embarrass themselves in front of leadership.
A nightmare.
Total nightmare. Then they go home and spend the entire evening, hours upon hours, ruminating on the disaster.
But here's what I don't understand and what I really want to push back on for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Biologically, when a cow chews cud, it's extracting necessary nutrients from tough plant fibers. The process has a vital physiological purpose, right?
Right.
When I am laying in bed at 3 a.m., torturing myself over using the wrong slang in London 5 years ago, I am not extracting anything useful. I am just suffering.
That's true, yeah.
Why did evolution wire our brains to endlessly torture us over an event that is already in the past and cannot be changed?
That is the paradox of the human social animal.
Explain that to me.
Well, from a modern clinical psychology perspective, rumination is generally considered a maladaptive behavior. It leads to depression and chronic anxiety. It is, as you say, self-torture.
Right.
However, if we look through the lens of evolutionary psychology, the brain is performing a very specific, albeit brutal, survival function.
How does reliving my own humiliation help me survive?
Because for our early ancestors, social standing wasn't just about feeling good, it was a matter of life and death. Literally. If you alienated your tribe, if you broke the social rules and committed a prehistoric faux pas, you risked exile. And exile from the tribe meant starvation or predation. You would die.
Oh, wow.
So when you commit a social blunder today, your brain's ancient circuitry perceives it as a literal threat to your biological survival.
So the rumination.
The rumination, the obsessive replaying of the event, is your brain's heavy-handed way of searing the rule into your neural pathways. It is torturing you to ensure you never make that specific mistake again because it believes your life depends on it.
That is staggering.
Yeah.
So the 3 a.m. ceiling stare is essentially my amygdala screaming, do not forget this or the tiger will eat us.
Precisely. And the reason we get stuck in that loop is tied directly to the brain's attempt to categorize the severity of the threat.
What do you mean?
We don't ruminate over every single interaction. We ruminate because we are frantically trying to gauge the damage. We're trying to figure out if our mistake was just a minor slip-up, or if it was, to use the next critical term from our source material, egregiously bad.
Egregiously. That word just sounds heavy, you know.
It does.
The speakers in the source highlight this as a C2 level vocabulary word, the highest echelon of advanced English lexicon. And it carries a massive amount of semantic weight.
It really does. You wouldn't use egregious to describe forgetting to buy milk.
No, definitely not.
The word signifies something that is outstandingly bad, shocking, or conspicuously offensive. It means the error didn't just cross the line, it leaped over it and set the line on fire.
The etymology of egregious is fascinating, too. It comes from the Latin ex grege, meaning rising above the flock.
Right.
Originally, it meant something exceptionally good. You stood out from the herd because you were excellent. But over the centuries, the English language warped it, and now standing out from the flock means you are conspicuously terrible.
It's like society decided that standing out too much is inherently offensive.
That linguistic shift perfectly mirrors the tribal anxiety we just discussed. To stand out from the flock is dangerous.
It is, and the source provides two distinct examples to contextualize what modern egregiousness looks like.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is a deeply personal professional failure. A speaker misidentifies an extremely important client. They don't just mispronounce the name, they call the client by an entirely different, incorrect name to their face.
Whew. That is an egregious error because it violates a foundational tenet of human respect.
Absolutely.
To forget someone's name, especially when they hold power or importance in your sphere, signals that you do not value them. It is outstandingly bad.
Exactly. And the second example shifts to media literacy and the concept of objective reality.
Right, the article example.
Yes, they describe a published article that is egregiously biased and riddled with factual errors.
So not just a slight lean.
No, it's not just an op-ed that leans a little to the left or a little to the right. It is a shocking, outstanding departure from the truth. It breaks the fundamental contract between a journalist and a reader.
So if we connect these mechanisms, the evolutionary drive to ruminate and the categorization of an egregious act, we see a direct causal loop.
We do.
We usually ruminate because our brain suspects the error wasn't just a tiny, forgettable slip. We replay the tape endlessly because we realize the offense might have been egregious, and our survival circuitry is panicking about the social fallout.
You are trapped in an analytical loop trying to measure the unmeasurable.
Right. Did I just make a quirky faux pas, or was that egregious? Will I be invited back to the dinner party, or am I exiled from the tribe?
And until your brain makes a definitive ruling on the severity of the damage, the cud chewing continues.
But eventually the sun comes up.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to leave your bed, you have to go to work, you have to face the people who witnessed the disaster.
Sadly, yes.
You reach a crossroads, you are done ruminating, or at least you have to function in reality while the background processing continues, and you are forced to make a strategic choice about how you will interact with the world.
This is the pivot from internal psychology to external sociology. How do you respond to your own failure?
And for the vast majority of human beings, when faced with an egregious social blunder, the very first instinctual urge is pure avoidance.
The flight response. We want to disappear.
And in a professional or social setting, that flight response often manifests as our next idiom, brushing it under the rug, or sweeping it under the rug.
Let's dissect the physical imagery of this idiom because it's so vivid. To brush something under a rug means you have a mess, dirt, debris, maybe a shattered glass, and instead of getting a dustpan, doing the work to clean it up and throwing it in the garbage, you simply conceal it.
You hide the problem under a veneer of normalcy.
Yes, purely in the desperate hope that people will just forget it exists.
The source material applies this directly to a high-stakes corporate environment. They give the scenario of a management team discovering significant accounting errors.
A huge deal.
Right. Instead of halting production, calling an audit, and addressing the failure, they try to brush the ledger mistakes under the rug. They hide the numbers, hoping the sheer momentum of the company will carry them past the problem without anyone lifting the carpet.
It is the ultimate manifestation of institutional cowardice.
Okay, but let me challenge this application because context is everything.
Fair enough.
In corporate accounting, hiding egregious errors is obviously catastrophic, not to mention illegal. But let's scale it back down to the dinner party.
Back to the dinner party.
Let's say the faux pas is extremely minor. Maybe you mispronounce a French wine, or you accidentally knock your fork onto the floor. In that scenario, isn't brushing it under the rug actually the most sophisticated, socially graceful move? Like, why stop the flow of a wonderful conversation to draw everyone's attention to the fact that you dropped a piece of silverware? Isn't ignoring it the polite thing to do?
That is a brilliant distinction to make, and it highlights the nuance of intent.
Okay.
If you drop a fork, the polite thing for everyone at the table to do is to seamlessly ignore it. That is social grace.
Right.
But the phrase brushing it under the rug carries a very specific, inherently negative connotation. It implies deliberate deception and the evasion of necessary accountability.
I see.
It usually applies to things that should be addressed but are being hidden out of embarrassment or fear.
So it's about the scale of the mess and whose responsibility it is to clean it up.
Exactly. Let's change the dinner party scenario. You don't drop a fork. You spill an entire glass of dark red wine on your host's pristine white carpet while they're in the kitchen.
Oh no. A nightmare.
An absolute nightmare. Now, if you casually slide a large armchair over the stain so the host doesn't see it and you say nothing, leaving them to discover it 2 days later.
Yikes.
That is brushing it under the rug. You are evading the immediate awkwardness of apologizing and paying for the cleaning. You are prioritizing your own short-term comfort over their property.
That makes total sense.
The physical metaphor is perfect here. When you brush dirt under a rug, the floor isn't actually clean. The rug is now lumpy. It becomes a tripping hazard.
Right.
By avoiding the acute pain of a confrontation, you create a chronic, hidden tension in the relationship.
Wow, that makes so much sense. Brushing it under the rug is the coward's way out of an egregious error, and it fundamentally damages trust because the lump is always there.
Precisely.
Which means if we want to survive the social disaster with our integrity intact, we have to look at the diametric opposite approach, the courage to act.
Right.
And our source material provides another incredibly vivid, culturally heavy idiom for this: bite the bullet.
This is the absolute antithesis of avoidance. To bite the bullet means to force yourself to do something deeply unpleasant, frightening, or difficult.
It means choosing to be brave in a tough spot, rather than sliding the armchair over the stain.
And the historical origin of this phrase, the source material explicitly calls this out, and it is a stark reminder of how intense language can be.
It is deeply visceral.
It really is. The phrase originates from the gruesome reality of 19th century battlefield medicine, specifically before the widespread availability of reliable anesthetics like ether or chloroform.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the scenario: a soldier has a shattered leg, the field surgeons have to amputate to save his life. There is no way to numb the agonizing, unimaginable pain of the saw.
Oh my God. So the surgeon would literally hand the soldier a lead bullet from their ammunition pouch and command them to bite down on it.
Precisely. Because lead is a relatively malleable metal, it wouldn't shatter the soldier's teeth, but it gave them something solid to clamp their jaw onto.
Right.
It prevented them from biting off their own tongue while they endured the absolute worst pain a human being can consciously experience.
They couldn't avoid the surgery. They couldn't brush the shattered leg under the rug, or they would die of gangrene.
Exactly.
They simply had to accept a horrific, acute pain in order to survive. They had to bite the bullet.
And while our modern applications of the phrase are rarely a matter of physical life and death, the psychological mechanics are identical. You are bracing yourself for acute pain to prevent chronic suffering.
When we use it today, it's the linguistic equivalent of ripping off a Band-Aid. We use it for emotional or social discomfort.
We do.
The source highlights a phenomenal everyday example that causes massive anxiety, not wanting to confront a landlord about an unjustified rent increase.
Oh, that's a perfect example. That confrontation is going to trigger your fight or flight response. Your heart rate will spike, your palms will sweat. You will feel that same surge of cortisol.
You desperately want to avoid it. You want to just pay the higher rent to keep the peace.
But we know your bank account cannot sustain the increase. You cannot run from the math.
So you can't run. You just have to bite the bullet, you pick up the phone, your hand is shaking, and you step into the arena.
You endure the profound awkwardness and conflict of the negotiation because the alternative, going bankrupt, is a slower, deadlier pain.
It's the conscious decision to step into the discomfort. And in the context of our social disaster roadmap, biting the bullet is the turning point.
Right.
You've realized you made an egregious faux pas. Maybe it was that colossal colloquial discrepancy in London. You've survived the 3 a.m. rumination. You've actively decided not to brush the mess under the rug. You've bitten the bullet.
Now the work begins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, what do you actually do? How do you speak? This takes us into the strategic execution of the fix, the art of damage control.
You have to engage in active repair. And the terminology the source discussion uses for this phase is incredibly analytical, almost militaristic.
It is.
You have to mitigate the fallout.
I am obsessed with how precise this phrase is. It removes all the messy emotion and replaces it with cold, hard strategy.
It really does.
Let's dissect it into its two component parts, because we use this constantly in business, but it applies perfectly to human relationships. First, mitigate.
To mitigate means to make something less severe, less harmful, or less painful. Crucially, it does not mean to erase.
Right. You cannot unring the bell. You cannot unspill the wine. The physics of time dictate that the mistake has happened.
Mitigating is the mature acceptance of reality. You acknowledge that a loss has occurred, and your entire focus shifts to preventing that initial loss from cascading into total ruin.
And that brings us to the second half of the phrase, fallout.
The fallout. We hear this term in the news constantly, and its origins are literal radioactive dust.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah, the fallout refers to the adverse side effects, the lingering consequences, or the toxic results of a disastrous situation. It's the radioactive ash that slowly settles over the landscape after the initial explosion.
So when you synthesize those terms, mitigating the fallout is the act of sweeping up the radioactive ash before it poisons the water supply.
That's a great analogy. It is active, forward-looking damage control. You are taking calculated steps to ensure the negative consequences are contained.
The source uses a very modern, high-stakes corporate example. A public relations team working tirelessly to mitigate the fallout from a CEO's highly controversial offensive tweet.
Think about the mechanics of that crisis. The CEO hits send. The tweet goes live.
And boom.
Right, the explosion happens instantly. The public is furious, the stock price starts to dip, the media is writing articles, the PR team cannot magically delete the tweet from the collective public consciousness.
The bomb went off.
So they go into mitigation mode.
They issue a carefully crafted apology. They announce the CEO is stepping down from a board, or they make a massive charitable donation to a related cause.
They are throwing water on the fire to lessen the severity of the anger. They are managing the radiation.
But here is the critical difference between a corporation and an individual. A PR team has millions of dollars, lawyers, and entire departments dedicated to strategy. They can buy goodwill.
Exactly.
Which begs the ultimate question for you and me. When I am standing in that dining room in London, and I've just committed an egregious faux pas that sucked the air out of the room, I don't have a PR team.
No, you definitely don't.
I don't have $1 million charity budget to throw at the host. What is the most effective psychological tool available to an individual to mitigate personal social fallout?
It's a tricky position.
My instinct is just to apologize profusely, over and over. I'm so sorry, I'm an idiot, please forgive me. But I always feel like that just makes everyone more uncomfortable.
And your instinct is entirely correct. Over-apologizing is actually a subtle form of emotional selfishness.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Selfishness?
Yes. When you apologize profusely, you are demanding that the offended party perform emotional labor to reassure you.
Wow.
You are forcing them to say, no, it's fine, don't worry about it, even when they are still uncomfortable.
Oh, wow. I'm forcing them to comfort me for the mistake I made.
Exactly. Which is why the source material points to a vastly superior, highly sophisticated social lubricant.
Which is?
The ultimate tool for personal mitigation is self-deprecation, or to use its synonym, being self-effacing.
Self-deprecation. The conscious act of belittling, undervaluing, or making a joke at the expense of oneself, usually to appear modest or to relieve tension.
The psychology behind this tactic is utterly brilliant. Why do we mock ourselves when we've made a mistake?
To make it less awkward.
Right. The source explicitly highlights the psychological goal. It instantly makes other people feel more at ease. It rebalances the power dynamic that your faux pas disrupted.
Let's examine the cultural context the source provides, because this is so deeply ingrained in certain societies, particularly in the UK.
Oh, absolutely.
They note that British conversational humor relies almost entirely on self-deprecation as a baseline operating system.
It's just how they communicate.
Yeah. They give this wonderful, highly relatable example of someone making a self-deprecating joke about their own atrocious cooking skills in order to make their dinner guests feel better about being served a burnt meal.
Let's analyze the invisible social dynamics of that specific dinner party, because the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife.
Set the scene for us.
The host proudly brings out a roast chicken, places it on the table, and it is undeniably burnt to a crisp. It's ruined.
Oh, no.
The guests are immediately thrown into a state of severe social anxiety.
They are caught in a trap. They don't know whether to pretend it's delicious, which makes them look like fools with no palate, or acknowledge that it's burnt, which makes them look incredibly rude and ungrateful.
The cognitive dissonance in the room is palpable. They are literally sitting at the table, internally ruminating in real time on how to handle the host's faux pas without causing further damage.
Yes. So the host realizes the error. They don't run back to the kitchen and cry. They bite the bullet.
Right.
They do not brush the burnt chicken under the rug by pretending it's like Cajun blackened chicken.
That would be terrible.
Instead, they actively mitigate the fallout through a surgical strike of self-deprecation. They look at the table and say, well, as you all know, my culinary skills are officially classified as a hazard to public safety, so I've preemptively ordered 3 pizzas. Who wants to gnaw on a piece of charcoal while we wait?
And instantly, physiologically, the tension in the room evaporates. You can almost hear the collective exhale.
It's like magic.
By lowering their own status, by actively insulting their own cooking before anyone else has the chance to even form the thought, the host completely removes the burden of politeness from the guests.
It is a profound act of social grace. Neurologically, laughter signals safety.
Exactly.
By making the joke, the host is absorbing the embarrassment entirely into themselves, acting as an emotional lightning rod, so the guests don't have to carry any of the awkwardness.
It's the ultimate demonstration of emotional intelligence. You are saying to the room, I see the mistake, I own the mistake, and I am signaling to you that I am not threatened by it, so you don't need to be uncomfortable for me.
To bring back our earlier analogy, if the faux pas is spilling that massive glass of red wine on the host's pristine white carpet,
Mitigating the fallout is immediately dropping to your knees, grabbing the paper towels, and furiously dabbing the spill before it sets.
right, but self-deprecation is the hilarious self-owns you make about your own absolute tragic clumsiness while you're down on the floor scrubbing.
Yes.
It's saying, this is why I'm not allowed nice things. I essentially have the motor skills of a golden retriever.
That's perfect.
You make the joke so the host is laughing at you instead of just standing over you fuming in angry silence.
You are simultaneously cleaning the physical mess on the floor and the emotional mess in the air.
It's just a masterclass in human interaction. Which brings us to the grand finale of this deep dive.
Let's do it.
I want to zoom out and look at the macro picture. We spent the last hour meticulously analyzing this deeply complex, highly nuanced web of vocabulary.
So many terms.
Faux pas, colloquial discrepancies, rumination, egregious errors, biting the bullet, brushing things under the rug, mitigating fallout, and self-deprecation.
It is an incredibly extensive, highly specialized lexicon.
It really is. And it begs a philosophical question. What does this massive vocabulary tell us about ourselves?
That's a great question.
The fact that humanity has spent centuries developing, refining, and utilizing hundreds of complex, hyper-specific words and idioms purely dedicated to the act of making mistakes, agonizing over them, and trying to fix them, what does that reveal about the human condition?
It leads perfectly to the final, beautiful C2 adjective introduced in our source material, a word that encapsulates this entire, messy, stressful journey. Fallible.
Fallible, F-A-L-L-I-B-L-E.
To be fallible means to have the inherent capacity to make mistakes, to be fundamentally prone to error.
It's just built into us.
It is the inescapable reality that your judgment will eventually fail you.
I am struck by how the source discussion frames this word. They don't treat it as a curse. They describe fallible as a beautiful and comforting word.
It is comforting.
And on the surface, to an ego-driven society, that sounds like a massive contradiction. Why would a word that literally translates to capable of making errors be considered deeply comforting?
Because it is the ultimate undeniable equalizer. It is the very essence of the human operating system.
Right.
If being fallible is a universal biological trait, it means that your specific faux pas, no matter how egregious it felt in the moment, is not a unique, isolating failure of your moral character.
It's just human.
It is simply evidence that you belong to the human race. You aren't broken. You're functioning exactly as designed. Nobody, regardless of their status, escapes the capacity for error.
The source brings in a really powerful, incredibly high-stakes professional example to illustrate just how universal this is.
This is a surgeon example.
Yes. They state, even the most experienced surgeons are fallible. That is why hospitals have so many safety checklists.
Let's meditate on the gravity of that for a second. Think about a neurosurgeon.
Okay.
Someone who has trained intensely for over a decade, who represents the absolute pinnacle of human precision, and who holds a fragile human life literally in their hands.
The stakes still getting higher.
Exactly. That individual is inherently biologically capable of making a catastrophic mistake. They are fallible.
Wow.
The medical institution does not expect them to be infallible gods. The institution expects them to be tired, distracted, mortal humans.
So what do?
Instead of demanding perfection, they engineer systems. They create rigid checklists, redundancy protocols, and nurse verifications to catch the errors that they know, with absolute statistical certainty, will inevitably occur.
The system assumes the failure rather than punishing it.
Yes.
So if we apply that system's thinking to the bigger picture, to our entire deep dive into social dynamics today, because we are all inherently fallible, we will inevitably commit a faux pas. It is completely unavoidable.
It's not a question of if, it is entirely a question of when.
You are going to step on a colloquial discrepancy landmine. You're going to make an egregious error that silences a room.
It will happen.
And because we know this failure is a mathematical certainty of the human condition, our goal shouldn't be the pursuit of social perfection. Our goal must be to build our own psychological checklists.
We must learn the art of mitigating the fallout rather than just retreating to our bedrooms and ruminating on our failures forever.
Yes, the advanced vocabulary we've analyzed today isn't just about speaking a higher tier of English. It is a cognitive toolkit for emotional resilience.
By giving your embarrassment a precise name, You remove the terrifying power it holds over you.
Let's briefly recap the roadmap of the journey we took today, tracing the full lifespan of a social blunder.
Let's do it.
It almost always starts with the faux pas, the false step off the invisible ledge, frequently triggered by a hidden colloquial discrepancy that lured us into a false sense of security.
Right, the trap.
Then comes the terrible mental freeze, the creeping realization that we've made an egregious error, which triggers our evolutionary survival instinct to just lay awake and ruminate endlessly.
Chewing the toxic cud of our own humiliation.
Such a gross, perfect metaphor. From the depths of that rumination, we are forced to face a critical behavioral choice. Do we surrender to our flight response, hide like cowards, and try to brush the mess under the rug, leaving a lumpy hazard for someone else?
Or do we brace for the pain, act with integrity, and bite the bullet?
And if we choose to be brave, if we bite the bullet, we immediately engage in active damage control. We step in to mitigate the fallout.
Frequently employing the brilliant, tension-releasing social shield of self-deprecation to absorb the awkwardness and put everyone else at ease.
And we go through this exhausting, dramatic, beautiful cycle again and again, simply because we are gloriously fallible.
In the original source discussion, the hosts issued a direct call to action to their audience, and I think it is highly applicable to you, the listener tuning in right now.
What was it?
They challenged their audience to take these powerful words: ruminate, egregiously, mitigate, fallible, and actively integrate them. Write your own sentences. Journal with them.
I love that idea.
Use them to write out the story of an egregious faux pas you've experienced and analyze how you either brushed it under the rug or successfully mitigated the fallout.
Because honestly, sharing those stories with the world is the ultimate form of self-deprecation. It proves to everyone around us that we are all stumbling through the dark together.
Exactly.
As we wrap up this deep dive today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something that really stuck with me when we were analyzing the history of these phrases.
The origins are so interesting.
They really are. We learned today that the idiom biting the bullet comes from a very literal, deeply traumatic, physical history of surviving unimaginable pain on a bloody battlefield.
It carries the heavy, visceral weight of real human suffering and survival.
It does. And yet today, we use it entirely casually to talk about calling our landlords or admitting we burned the chicken.
It's wild.
So I want you to think about your own native language or the specific colloquial slang in the region where you grew up. What is the most graphic, intense, or deeply historical idiom that you use every single day, entirely casually, to describe dealing with a mundane, socially awkward situation?
Language is effectively an archaeological dig of our collective survival.
Exactly. The words we use without thinking often carry the heaviest ghosts of our ancestors. When you break a social rule, the diagnostic x-ray might be murky, but the words we use to heal the break are incredibly precise if you just know where to look.
It's a superpower.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep expanding your lexicon, keep making spectacular mistakes, and keep embracing your incredibly fallible nature.